Hey, I'm glad you're tuned in to the Business Emergency Room today. Happy to have you here. Let's get into it. Some leaders drift straight into disaster, not because they ignore the signs, but because they never saw them. In today's noisy world, not scanning your environment is like sailing blindfolded in a shipping lane, really. And you can't respond to what you don't perceive. Many of us face the challenge of overscanning and trying to consume too many signals, leading to paralysis, or underscanning, effectively being so overwhelmed by the amount of signals that we don't scan enough of them and we have major blind spots. So, today's episode is about how do you stop trying to see everything, but start learning where to look and what to act on. Leadership today isn't just about scaling. It's about navigating constant uncertainty, market disruptions, and high-pressure decisions. If you're dealing with chaos, bottlenecks, and relentless pressure, welcome to the Business Emergency Room. Today's topic is most frequently labeled as environmental scanning. Personally, that's not a term that I hear very frequently used, so you may not have either. You may refer to it as business intelligence or market research or risk management or scenario analysis or trend analysis or a combination of all of the aboves. The definition of environmental scanning is ongoing process of monitoring, interpreting, and filtering external signs that could impact your business. And you need to think months to years out. I'm not talking about situational awareness and today. This is the slightly longer term stuff. And I'm sure you do some of it. I'm also quite sure that most of you do a lot of it if you have a major event or a major shift. Because typically these events should always trigger one, and environmental scanning has nothing to do with green, but more your business environment in general. And so typically if there's mergers or buyouts or acquisitions or major pivots or entries into new markets or any of these events that are big changes, I'm sure you all are tuned into doing some level of this, and whatever you call it. You might not call it environmental scanning. So that's not what I want to talk about today, because what I want to talk about today is in the context of being in turmoil or in upheaval. It's the ongoing monitoring. So if you are not planning for a major change and hence taking this snapshot of the further out world, how do you have a more ongoing way of keeping your eyes on the ball, and extend that situational awareness? So beyond what's happening right now that could affect your next move or that could affect operations today or tomorrow, what are the trends or threats that are forming on the horizon, the more strategic stuff? So environmental scanning is like a radar for your business, and it's looking beyond your current dashboard to see what's flying at you from the outside world. And in the current climate, we all run the risk that we're so busy keeping up with today that we stop monitoring the further out stuff. And that, if you get that wrong, can lead to major pain, lasting impact, and in some cases, it's a pretty terminal affliction. Typically, most of us are in either of two camps. We're either in the overwhelm here, so we're drowning in data, we're drowning in opinions of which way the world may or should or could evolve, and hence don't know which one to tune into. Or we're on the other side and we're more in the blindness space. We're missing warning signs altogether until it's too late. And that's a very real problem. This happens to the biggest and the best of us. So things to think of is that Nokia entirely missed the smartphone signals. Blockbuster ignored Netflix and Boeing's blind spots before the Max crisis. All of these were major companies that used to be good at this and somehow still missed the signals that became their downfall, or at least led to major slumps in their business. And these are not the only ones, because 70% of business failures are tied to failure to adapt to external change, according to McKinsey. So 70% of business failures have some origin in the lack of the lack or insufficient environmental scanning. Only 6% or executives say their organizations are very good at detecting early warning signs, or I would prefer to actually turn it around. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, their global crisis survey, actually, a shocking 94% of leaders acknowledge that their company struggles to spot critical emerging threats in time. 94%. That's almost everybody. Then the good news is that companies that continually scan and adapt outperform the laggards by almost 2.5 times in revenue growth, according to Accenture. Almost 2.5 times. That's quite an attractive idea, right? But executives spend up to 30% of their time consuming irrelevant or non-actionable data. So we might be thinking, this is according to MIT, by the way, we might be assuming that we are at least absorbing information and trying to do this, but yet do it inefficiently or ineffectively, because almost a third of what we're consuming has got nothing to do with anything. So many teams either try to watch everything or they watch nothing. Neither works. So what would work? Well, I have a structured framework for you, and we're talking about environmental scanning. And so my framework is very easily called the SCAN framework. I believe totally in fit-for-purpose approaches, something that helps you track what matters without grinding your operation to a halt. I also don't want you to tee up more systems, processes, obligations, or work than you need or than is relevant. So let's start with the framework with the letter S. The S stands for signals. The first thing I want you to think about is, what are the weak or early signals of change? What are some of the signals that you need to look out for, whether they start to appear on the horizon, yes or no? And then we look for anomalies, emerging shifts in client behavior, customer behavior, shifts in regulation, shifts in supply chains. So an example could be that you see a spike in permit processing times. Well, that's a signal, a regulatory signal, and it's not a fluke. If it's one or two or occasional, it's a fluke. If you start to see a pattern, you probably want to do something with it. That takes me to C, context. So what external factors give those signal meaning? So is there industry trends or macroeconomic forces or geopolitics or market movement that plays into this? So in for instance, the fact is that in a lot of government organizations are losing employees at the moment. So is the permitting simply a matter of under-resourcing, or is the permitting actually more a result of a change in legislation, or does it have anything to do with changes in import and export regulations, or with the fact that there's unclarity around it, and hence it may be a more temporary situation until people know better how this is going to affect things. Then the A in SCAN is for alignment. How do these signals align with your current strategy or goals? Or is this a distraction? And so something that's happening in the market, but actually whichever way it goes, it doesn't matter too much for you? Or is it a threat, or is it an opportunity? So the example could be that you have a manufacturing firm and it's tracking renewable energy incentives and sees a new federal program. But in pursuing that and in spending a lot of time in it, they actually oversaw that the size of the incentive and the timing in which it comes available is not actually going to really make a big difference to their business. And hence, or in meeting the requirements for this grant, they need to add stuff to the research or to the scope of what it was intending to do, beyond what it was intended to take on. And so you're actually adding work to get that federal program or that grant or these incentives. Is that actually worth it, right? Or is it diagonally opposed to what you are working on? Well, then that becomes a threat to your business, of course. And then that brings us to the last letter in SCAN, the N for navigation. Once you've got your signals and you've figured out the context and you've established how it aligns or misaligns with where you're going, we're getting to what action should you take based on this? How should it affect how you navigate the current world? You can create some options to work out or some different scenarios. Do you want to pause? Do you want to pivot? Do you want to invest? Do you want to exit? Or do you want to build it into your regular way of operating? You're assigning an owner to this and putting a little change effort into place to build it in there. Or is this something that's going to be evolving for a while, and hence you want to put somebody on it who's going to monitor the situation, and as steps progress, feedback and saying, okay, it's now moving in this direction. This is the point where we agree that we would have to make some changes, or it's leading to some go, no-go decisions from our side. If we talk about navigation, it could also be, how do you build this into your way of operating, because it's become a thing to monitor and a pulse to keep your fingers on. That, of course, typically leads to the question, how do you not go crazy on how much information you're going to collect? Because there must be a way to do this practically, because if I tell you that I want you to figure out the signals, you might have some definition around the signals, but then where do you all look for them? We go back to keeping it fit for purpose. I want you to think of a cadence. So maybe consider doing this on a quarterly basis, or monthly, or figure out which of these things you want to actually look at regularly, or with what cadence, because how quickly do they have the tendency to change. The biggest filter in all this should be your risk register. Your risk register should guide where you look more closely, because that should provide you the framework as to what external developments could derail you the most. And so I would start there. If you're looking at which signals in the market should I be looking for, you also want to assign who owns scanning for which domain. There's no sense in putting this all the way at the top. You want to put this with people who can best assess the information and interpret it and distill down its relevance for your specific business. So do you have subject matter experts in-house, or logical departments to look after this? I would also advocate that it's not necessarily logical to have your department lead do this. Scanning information and keeping track of news and trends and data is not everybody's cup of tea, but those who like this also tend to love it or like it above average. And so I would challenge you to find those individuals in your organization who actually love this kind of work, to ensure that it actually gets done and that there's some level of thoroughness to it. And then what are the tools for making sure that the information and dissemination of information for ongoing environmental scanning is actually not leading to complete overwhelm of everything? So I would start with, what are some of the signals and things that you are keeping track of more for your situational awareness, so for your immediate day-to-day business? Are you on those signals looking just at what's happening today and next week? Or are these same sources maybe also providing you longer term outlooks that you could use? Are you at least seeing those two, or do you tend to always stop at kind of the immediate factors? Is there an easy way to extend that so that you, maybe not every time, but when you check into the day-to-day stuff, you also occasionally look at the longer term stuff that comes with it? Because if you find options like that, that leads to very little extra time and effort, which leads me to the fact that I think you should curate your long list of potential sources, information sources, to which ones are trusted for your kind of industry, which ones are most impartial and factual or most relevant for your region or your specialty, and look at ways to automate it. So, for instance, many people are still unaware that even at an individual level, you can create Google alerts. Setting up alerts in Google to send you an email when something new is published or posted on a specific topic. So particularly if you're looking at subjects that are a bit more unicorn or special or different, this is an easy way to at least get alerted when there is an uptick in information being posted or articles being posted around certain subjects. As alluded to before, I would engage your frontline. I would put the information gathering with people who are your eyes and ears in the outside world, and make it part of their job to report back on what they're seeing. So make that part of the process by means of asking and engagement and communication. I think as a leader, you really need to show that this is relevant by engaging these people directly, and inviting and creating a space where they can come in and speak directly to the board in whatever, or the C-suite in whatever way that is reasonably practical, so that you hear information from the horse's mouth, because too often things get lost in translation, or distilled down to the bare basics, missing some important nuances if it goes into reporting. I do think you need that periodical update. You probably are doing some of this. So if you're doing that, you might want to review it or streamline it, or have a look occasionally at whether you're still gathering information about things that are outdated and no longer relevant. So maybe again, take it back to your risk register, but do a competitive intelligence snapshot once a year, twice a year, depending on how active innovation in your business segment is. You can do business briefs. I remember that we also would do on our biggest service providers quarterly. We would collate a business brief on all the activities we had as a company with them, to look at trends and issues that were happening on all continents, and some were happening only in certain places, and to allow what we call the gin and tonic set, the escalation set up above, to have a meeting between both businesses and be fully aware of what was happening further down. Typically, those are good sources of signals of things changing or moving. Some people call this radar meetings. And radar meeting might be a more open discussion where you put the frontline people together with leadership, and with a time limit, give everybody some time to talk about what it is they're seeing. Which leads me to the fifth point here, is that I think you should force yourself to create an update to the business on the outlook in writing. So on the outlook of trends and signals and developments in the external market. Because if you do your environmental scanning and you're getting insights and you're figuring out how you're going to use this, even if you don't do the formal final translation because you don't want to share it in that format, if you share on a quarterly or biannual basis your outlook on the market and what generally has been found and what you're seeing and what you're trying to incorporate on where you're going, you stand a chance that if you're missing things, you will get feedback on that. Because what will happen is, by you being transparent and sharing that with your whole organization, what it is that you're seeing on the horizon, if you have according to them, glaringly obvious missing pieces in there, or disconnects, or there's more granularity to add to it than they're seeing there, and people will bring that back up to you. So by opening that door, by you sharing, you're creating a safety net for yourself by means of a feedback loop through your people, because inevitably the people in your organization see and hear way more than you are aware of, or than even you structurally are trying to build in to try and see, by putting a bit of a process in place to capture this information. So Environmental scanning, it's not a green thing. It's a business environment scanning. It's an outlook. It's your long-term weather radar. I don't care what you call it. I do care that you do it, and I do care that you do it not just when you have a major change or event going on. I want you to do this on a continuous basis because it's a volatile world out there. And if you can't see it, you can't steer around it. And if you see everything, you'll steer nowhere. I provided you the SCAN framework. It isn't about knowing it all. It's about knowing enough to keep moving safely and to not be caught completely off guard. So audit your current scanning rhythm. Are you doing enough of it? Are you doing too much of it? Are you putting your efforts in the right place? Or do you have stuff sitting in that 30% I talked about, the 30% of information that leaders consume that is really not relevant? You can figure that out through good conversation, seldom all by yourself. So have a look at it, challenge yourself to review it. Maybe try applying the SCAN framework to one real situation this week. It's pretty simple. And reach out if you want help building a more steady state awareness muscle in your business, something fit for purpose that doesn't blindside you by not having eyes on things, or blindside you by simply being inundated in so much that you can't see the forest from the trees. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope you remember SCAN. I hope you remember to develop some rhythm and to share. I hope you remember putting the work and the effort with the people who are best placed to see and hear things. And I hope that you remember to filter what it is you're all observing and take it back to how does it align with my business and how does it now impact how I navigate? Because just absorbing it and then it not leading to anything or leading to the wrong course or the wrong, let's say, not useful course corrections, of course, doesn't get you any further. So remember, SCAN, the signal, the context, the alignment, and the navigation. And I want to close with that you can't outsource your vision. If you make scanning part of how you steer, not something you dust off in a storm, you will be much more successful in this volatile and uncertain and complex world around us. Thank you for tuning in today, and I hope to have you back here for our next episode. Thank you. That's it for this episode of the Business Emergency Room. If you are currently dealing with chaos or disruption in your business, please reach out. You can email, text, or call, and I will find a way to connect with you within 24 hours. I've helped others steer out of the storm, and I know I can help you too. Talk soon. Please like, subscribe, and share.